Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self, and I will be your host today. In today's podcast episode, we dive into a fascinating conversation with Frank Trotter, a pioneering figure in banking and an avid outdoor enthusiast. Frank shares his unique journey from his early days in St. Louis playing hockey and racing cars to founding EverBank and now embarking on a new venture with BattleBank. Throughout the episode, though, Frank discusses his innovative approach in the financial industry and his love for adventure, including tales from the renowned Excellent Adventures with Skip Schweiss, an earlier podcast guest, and his experiences hiking in remote regions like Argentina. With a focus on the intersection of life's challenges and successes, Frank offers insights into how his entrepreneurial spirit complements his passion for exploring the great outdoors. It's really cool to hear how that overlaps. It's a conversation that highlights the importance of community, the beauty of nature, and the enduring spirit of adventure in enriching both our personal lives and professional endeavors. So tune in for an inspiring conversation that covers the heights of business innovation and all the way to the mountains of Colorado. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Frank Trotter. Well, Frank Trotter, welcome to the On Adventure podcast. You come highly recommended, and our conversations coming into this, I've really enjoyed. And I would say the same about you, that I walk away from with a lot of these conversations is like, these people are like my kind of people, and the stuff we're going to get into and talk about that I know you spend your time doing and focusing on is super, super interesting to me. So I appreciate you spending the time this morning in your busy schedule to do this.
Well, thanks so much for having me on, Josh. Looking back over your 48 or so previous ones, it's an impressive group of people. There are looks like a lot of fun. As you said, it's kind of our folks, which there are a lot of different ways to define community. Obviously, years ago, it was all your local geography, but we're all over the place in business these days. And you kind of have a road family and a home family and a lot of folks with whom you have a convergence of interests. And it was good to see all the folks you've talked to. And it's great to meet you.
Yep. Cool. Yeah. This episode 1 and probably 2 and 3 and 4 were really just like friends of mine, people I went to school with, and I interviewed a few clients that I knew had interesting stories. And then it quickly got into, well, you need to talk to this person, and you need to talk to this lady, and this guy did this. And like I said, it's a very similar community, whether it's somebody riding a bicycle across Europe or skiing down mountains, or, Skip Schweiss's Excellent Adventures, which you're very familiar with. And so I'm excited to see where the conversation goes. So let's start with a little bit about you. And so tell folks who you are, where you tend to spend most of your time, because I know it's split. And then let's see, something that's interesting about you.
Well, that'll be interesting. Frank Trotter, been around for quite a while. I guess that's called age, but that's just a number, not a big deal. We kind of split our time these days. We lived in St. Louis for a couple centuries growing up, and once we got back from college and grad school and so on, and been involved in banking since around 1980, back in the dark days, a little bit before the Dead Sea became sick. And right now we split our time between Colorado up in the mountains. This is actually Battle Mountain. We'll get to the battle part down the road, and Holy Cross is here, Teener.
Right.
The mountain of the Holy Cross. But we spend about 70% of our time up in the mountains in Colorado. Both our daughters live in the Front Range, Denver, Boulder area, grandkids down there, and St. Louis, where we spent many, many years. So, long time there, been in banking. Keep joking I'm kind of unemployable any other way, but that's okay. And, one of the things about banking and financial services, like in your line of work, is there are a lot of interesting people, and people like to tell you stories. And it might be, I escaped from the Eastern Bloc in the 1960s after the wall was built, or I built this business, or I went bankrupt 3 times, but I made it by perseverance. And those are great stories to tell and great stories to hear from people in there. With our world, where we have a confidentiality requirement, people are often willing to share, and they're not bragging. They're just saying, this is what I've done. And there are a lot of very impressive individuals out there in the world. But, in terms of that's kind of the quickie background of me. We worked for banks in the 80s and 90s here in St. Louis, started something called EverBank in 2000, ultimately sold that to TIAA in 2017 and retired, after which I've now flunked retirement. We're in the process of starting something else called BattleBank. So that's why Battle Mountain here is interesting, our namesake. And if you could really see it, there's a lift right here because Battle Mountain is also known as Blue Sky Basin at Vail.
Okay.
So it's our namesake, it's our area, and we're about 20 minutes down valley from there for about 70% of our year.
That's very cool. And what type of banking, not being an expert in banking, but it does seem that there's different areas that you can get into. Is there one area that you have been more particularly focused on?
Well, it's interesting. We did commercial lending and construction lending, all those great things, in the 80s and 90s. I started out working directly for the chief credit officer of a bank here in St. Louis called Mark Twain Banks, but moved over to the markets group, a bond desk, really, trading bonds for a while, and got into the currency trading side of the business and created some products. We had a lot of clients at the time that wanted to make a diversification of their portfolio into different foreign currencies. And the light bulb, we'd done a project in grad school that related to currencies and some of the mathematics behind it. And the light bulb sort of went on and says, well, we're a bank. We can issue deposits. There's no restriction on what currency those deposits are denominated in. So we created something called the World Currency Deposits. It just allows people to diversify, or their advisor to diversify into different currencies. So really began there, and that turned into a remote business. Back in the 80s and 90s, most banking was local. You went to the Kiwanis, you went to the local clubs, and you tried to drum up business. But we started to learn how to do this on a national basis, reach people who were like-minded, who wanted to do this sort of thing. We're self-directed investors. And that sort of led ultimately, after Mark Twain Banks was sold, to creating EverBank, which was an entirely direct-to-consumer business. And we continued that currency and precious metals area of our business there. And we'll probably do that, and we will, not probably, we're definitely doing that again at BattleBank. So we like high-value accounts. We like direct internet. I guess EverBank was one of the very first internet banks.
Yeah, that's how I know it.
And sort of to put a time zone on that, we launched it about 8 years before the iPhone. So people really weren't online yet.
Yeah,
maybe a little bit early. So that's kind of what we've been doing in banking. And of course, we got into the whole business over time. But that's kind of where the grassroots came from.
So if you were 8 years early on internet banking, what's the next thing that you're going to be 8 years early on this time with BattleBank?
Oh boy, we'll have to see what that is. I think right now we're just putting something together to get out the door. We'll definitely be doing precious metals and currencies. And, I think some of our retirement services where you can do anything that's not ineligible in IRS speak in your IRA. I mean, most of us just do a 60-40 portfolio at Schwab or Fidelity or whatever our advisor tells us to do. But you can do multifamily housing, you can do hard money loans, you can do, a lot of different things. And we provide a facility to do that. But, amazingly, 25 years after launching EverBank, the big banks are paying no interest. They're charging high fees. So that door is still wide open. So it makes it what we felt is an opportunity. And, we're hustling to get out the door and join some of our clients in doing that.
That's cool. Yeah, there definitely opportunities there. We see it in the financial services side, and the SEC actually just slapped some big fines on some of the large custodians that also are banks just in the last week for not paying a market rate out, but still encouraging. That's probably the best word, but there's a lot of client money that unknowingly sits in these sweep funds that pay next to nothing. And as an advisor, we're trying to pay attention to that and how do we work around it, but you shouldn't have to work around it,
I agree completely. It's interesting. I won't say the company name, but the CFO of a publicly traded custodian located on the West Coast that recently moved to Texas said on an earnings call, well, why would I pay more if people aren't paying attention?
Oh my gosh.
And I don't know that he would like to have that statement reminded now and again, but it's what he said. And I suspect that's what he believes. And so, it's your job as an investment advisor. It's the job of all the advisors out there to, work for your client. And one of the ways you work for your client is, the rates that they should have been getting for the last several years are over 4%. And they've been getting 0 to 45 basis points.
Right.
And that's just not right. Is it legal? Yeah. Is it part of your fiduciary duty? Maybe, maybe not.
Right.
But it's closing in on it.
Yeah.
And certainly it's something, if I want to have a client, I would like to look them in the eye and say, I worked for you and I got you this rate.
Yeah. Yep. But there will be a reckoning of this at some point, I think, because these large custodians have built a business model off of, we don't charge fees for trades or for most things, but they generate a ton of revenue off of these spreads. Mm-hmm. And if that goes away, then something's got to give. And
that's right.
So it'll be interesting to see. And again, as an advisor on the ground with this, I'm trying to pay attention to it for sure. But that's a bit of a rabbit hole there.
Yeah, we can stay there all day.
You're right. So you skipped over the something interesting. Let's go back to that.
Oh, geez. Well, maybe a number of little teeny interesting things. Everybody's sort of thinking about online payments these days. We launched in the 90s from Mark Twain Bank something called eCash, which was the very first way to make a payment person to person or irrevocably and instantly. It was a good 12 years too early, which is why you don't have it today. And it was coming up about the same time as something called PayPal was being launched,
yes,
which of course has done very well. That was, one little bit of interest, and going way back in time, I actually had this fantasy that I was going to be a Formula One driver and got into the minor leagues of, motor racing. Wasn't really all that great at it, looking back at it, but spent a year in Europe and a year here in the States, driving in, not quite in circles. This is turn left, turn right. So it's a sort of a Formula One, not an IndyCar type stuff. But that is a million years in the rearview mirror.
So how does a kid from St. Louis that grew up playing hockey end up racing cars?
It's a great question. Probably one of the reasons I'm not a Formula One driver. The kids that make it have been driving go-karts since they were, 5 years old.
I see.
But, got into it. There is a whole minor league system, not unlike baseball. I mean, you could, if you're a decent baseball player, you could probably find some semi-pro team that you can play for. And I guess it's kind of the same way there. But you go, you do all the amateur races, that kind of graduate to sort of semi-pro. And if you keep making it, then you keep climbing up the tree. I was in and out pretty quickly, very appropriately, I would say, because some of the guys that made it that were nearby us were clearly the ones you would expect to make it. So it's kind of like any other sporting or competition activity. That one kid that's got the vision, it's got the talent, it's got the speed, got the skills. It doesn't matter what your sport is or your activity is. But I thought that was kind of interesting. It was a lot of fun, very different era, and enjoyed the heck out of it. But it was time to wrap it up and go back to grad school and get a real job at the end of that.
How old were you in this time frame?
Right out of college.
Okay.
I sort of joke, I used my chemistry degree to burn petrol in a car at a remarkable rate of speed.
So chem major in undergrad, and then you raced cars, and then you went back to, did you go back to grad school specifically for banking or finance? What was the focus?
We were, at the time, Washington University was a finance-oriented place. Jess Yowitz was one of the lead professors there that did a lot of the early work in decomposing options and mortgage-backed securities and so on. And Bill Marshall was kind of writing all the books on banking at the time. So I had a great grounding there, did a bunch of independent studies with those guys, and then was recruited into that Mark Twain Banks after that, which was just a very highly entrepreneurial outfit out of St. Louis that did great, burned brightly, and sold out. So it sold out at the right time, at the time when banks were being purchased for a good premium, and ended up sort of supplying the St. Louis, Kansas City, greater Midwest area with a lot of good bankers.
And what bigger bank ended up buying them?
Well, it was one of those bigger fish sort of situations. Mercantile bought us, which was purchased by First Star, which was purchased by U.S. Bank.
Oh, wow.
So it kind of rolled up, 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 up. And, we were barely out the door by the time US Bank had the trade.
So did you stuck around for some of those transitions?
Just about 6 months. We
I
used
see.
to joke that a friend and I had offices next to each other. We said that there were indentations in the wall from hitting our head against the wall.
Yeah. And then EverBank was on the back end of that?
We started that a couple of years after that.
I see.
So we started working on it right as we left, but headed out. It took about 2 years to put that up, and then we launched that in the year 2000.
Got it. So tell me a little bit about your family. You married, kids?
Yep.
What's the...
All the above.
Okay.
We got together with my wife right at the tail end of the racing era. I have no idea why she bought the story, but I'm delighted that she did. They have a couple kids now, 40 and 37, both living in Colorado, and a couple grandkids up in the Boulder area. So it's a great group where we hang out all the time, and
That's cool.
Outdoors, and everybody's been tortured from an early age with having to do the hike wherever we go, and is now still into it.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly something I want to explore a little bit, is where this adventure legacy might lead within your family. But if you have two of them that are living on the Front Range of Colorado, that says something, that it's in their blood. And are they pursuing their own ways outdoors as well? Like it's
Absolutely,
something they really enjoy?
Yeah. Everybody's very outdoors oriented. We spend, our older daughter spends a lot of time up at our place in Colorado. We're out skiing or hiking or whatnot. She's been on quite a number of the excellent adventures.
Oh,
Regular person there. And the younger daughter and her husband are both outdoor people. He's into these Ragnars. They've all done those.
oh yeah.
You're familiar with that.
Yep.
And the grandkids have been up and down a lot of the hikes in Boulder area, the Flatirons, sometimes reluctantly, but they are 2 and 4, so they get to push back a little bit right now.
So raising a family while working in a pretty rigorous industry, when did outdoors and kind of hard pursuits, when did that start for you? What did that look like? How'd you work it in?
Well, it's a great question, and my wife's a neonatal nurse practitioner, so has long hours and so on at the hospital as well, and she was running the program. But whenever we would go anywhere, we would find a way to, whether it was when the kids were younger, a little hike, as they got older, a little bigger, and just always maybe going what I'll call beyond the concrete. We came down from Half Dome a number of years ago on the Excellent Adventure, and eventually you bump into a section that's paved. And they're, it's great because people disabled and so on can make it up to see the falls and so on. But beyond, we started to call it beyond the pavement in all these areas. And, a lot of people think the average time people spend at the rim of the Grand Canyon is under 20 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Which is just horrifying.
Yeah.
But as soon as you drop below the rim, it's completely different. And we always try to do something like that along the way. Even getting out here in Missouri, we have a farm up in the northwest corner. We always tramp around there. And it's just, when you can, you get out and do things. And, the kids were into sports, different types of soccer, field hockey, horseback riding, and so on. That, they were pretty active. So just extends that activity. And my wife, very good at all the above as well. I think I'm not going to find her on an excellent adventure, but she'll be there and maybe do one of the shorter hikes on the same day.
Yeah, that's cool. So were the excellent adventures your starting point into kind of organized trips, or were you doing that before you got into that?
Well, I think it may have been sort of the reinvigoration point. I grew up Boy Scouts, and all that kind of stuff, explorers. Okay. So we did plenty of camping, hiking, backcountry. A couple of the camps I went to when I was a kid were all outdoors, up in New Hampshire and out in the boondocks here in Missouri and things like that. So we were always outdoors, but it was like maybe a reinvigoration of it all. And obviously they're a little more significant in size, a little more epic in their character. And it just sort of reminds you to go, oh yeah, I'll go do that. I pointed to the Mount of the Holy Cross here when we got our place out in Colorado. That was pretty much the first thing we went up. Our older daughter and I and one of her friends, and actually a number of the people from Vail Mountain Rescue. We took a hike up there one day, and that was sort of our first 14er in a while. And again, just once you go do one, you want to do another one and get back out there in the backcountry, or doesn't always have to be a 14er. You can, walk over the local hill. So we've always done stuff, and the Excellent Adventures were a great reinvigoration of that whole process, plus a wonderful community of people.
Yeah. So for anyone that wants to hear more detail about what we're referring to, it would be my episode 32 with Skip Schweiss, and he goes into great detail of how he and Chip have organized these trips, and he said the same thing multiple times. Like, the community that you guys have organized is really part of what makes it special. And certainly they pick some pretty darn good spots around the globe to go do these things too. So that doesn't hurt.
Exactly. And they've been, and Skip and Chip have just done an amazing job of doing this. Call Skip the supreme commander of the operations, sort of like Dwight Eisenhower in World War II. Yeah. But it's a huge task, first picking something that's both significant but has bail points. And that's a tough thing right out of the gate. Is there lodging anywhere near the place? How do you eat? And it really shouldn't be their responsibility necessarily to put all this together. But to date, they've done, a significant amount of that work. And they'll even go pre-hike the hike just to make sure, they made some changes for this coming August hike based on doing what was originally the full hike was just too much, recognizing that in August, it's probably going to be 110 to 115 degrees. And they did it in October, and it was too hot then. Oh. So, doing all that work is just so appreciated by everybody. And I hope that both Skip and Chip understand that.
Yeah, he mentioned that, and I believe I asked him why do that, because it's not a job. He doesn't get paid for it, and I believe the response was because of the people. I get to be around these people that he loves dearly and loves being around, and the work is the path to get to that. So it's pretty special. It certainly is not something I've really ever seen before, and it's been going on a long time at this point. So tell me, how many of them have you done, and which one stands out as like maybe a particular favorite?
Yeah, it's a great question. I probably missed 3 or 4. I'll go backwards with that.
So you've been on most of them.
Been on most of them. Didn't do Shasta. Okay. Didn't do Hawaii. Both of those with injury timeout. I was on the DL at those points, and I think we had a conflict on one of the other ones, and actually had to go back and do Cactus to Clouds because it was in the middle of COVID. We went back about a year later and did it. So it wasn't with the main group, but they, in a lot of ways, they all stand. I mean, Whitney is hard to beat. It's just gorgeous. It's a heck of a difficult hike. The Grand Canyon. One of the interesting ones certainly is the 4-pass loop out of near Aspen.
Not too far from you.
First of all, that's a bear. We weren't living out there at the time, but it's a bear of a hike, but it couldn't be more gorgeous. I mean, everybody takes pictures of the Maroon Bells. I mean, that is the poster child for entire state.
Yep.
And probably the only one where you kind of say, I just assumed maybe I skipped it was not because it wasn't a wonderful place, but when we went to Palisades, the old Squaw Valley, Tahoe area. And that just because it was, at least by my measure, was 38 miles and it was hard.
Was it really?
Particularly, well, just because it was coming downhill, seemed like forever on old knees. So, but it was gorgeous. It was a great place. It was wonderful to see everybody, but that's probably the one I could have skipped.
Okay. So when you get, and that's a good one to highlight, that you finish this thing that you started, and most people don't realize that many times, whether you're running or hiking or backpacking, the downhill sometimes is harder than the uphill. It's just banging on a different part of your body in a different way that feels a little more unnatural maybe. And so you've got bad knees as a former hockey player.
Well, they've actually, and it's kind of funny because after we did the presidentials in New Hampshire, it was funny. I got in the car with my wife to drive back to the airport, and we called the orthopedic surgeon and booked a tune-up and a lube on one of my knees for the next Friday.
Yeah.
But it actually, and it's kind of a funny thing. After that, the Stedman Clinic out in Vail is a big orthopedic clinic, very famous, and they had a research division. and I got into a knee pain study that was sponsored by DoD Navy,
Oh,
which
wow.
to me means that the SEALs have bad knees. They're carrying 120-pound packs for
Yeah.
weeks and months, and I think they'd like them to feel better. But after finishing this study, it's magic. My knees are not a problem,
Wow.
period. And they were torturous, and I was thinking about giving a lot of this stuff up. But it's
All right.
magic. And not like they don't hurt from time to time, but it's at the end of the study, and I came back for a second part of the study a couple of years later for dosage. And it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's magic. For all I know, I got the placebo, but if I did, it still worked.
It's a powerful placebo. So it was medication, not like physical therapy or
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's and Mayo Clinic's been working with the same substance as well, and it somehow does something to clear out all the gunk without having to go in on a orthoscopic
That is fascinating.
tune up in the loop.
Yeah.
And I've other friends try it, and some of it worked for some, and it didn't work for others. So it's like everything else.
Yeah.
But it sort of kept me in the business for probably another 10 or 15 years.
So let me go back to this trip in Tahoe where you were in a bit of pain. The thing that I find with a lot of explorers is if you're doing anything worth doing, it gets really, really difficult at times. And you've got to have a way to work through it, whether it's a mantra or a distraction technique, or sometimes it's the community, right? Having people around you that are cheering you on. When you have done these, and I guess specifically Tahoe, when you get to that dark spot, what do you do?
Well, in this case, Tahoe worked out great. We had a wonderful sort of cadre or group of people that were doing it. I believe on that one, and I'll probably miss one. Sorry, is Scott McKillop and Alex Potts and Billy Oliverio, and just a wonderful group of folks. And everybody was a bit tortured, and so it was more about the humor and the conversation. And it's just right down there. We'll get there. And that's one of the things sometimes, particularly when it's a formal area like that, you can see where you're going. You understand it's going to take you a while to get there, but at least you have a vision in sight. Sometimes, of course, when you're in the backcountry, I'm sure you've experienced it yourself, where you don't really know where that endpoint is. You do have your GPS, you do have your map, but sometimes you don't quite know how far that is. But when you can see it, sometimes that's almost more torture, because it might, even if you can see it, it might still be 5 miles.
Yeah. That doesn't seem like it's getting any closer sometimes.
But you just put your head down and put one foot in front of the other. I mean, it's same thing as anything else, like work or life or illness or whatever it is. You just got to get up and do it.
Do you have these pursuits and kind of a life lesson like that? Do you see that overlap and play into your business career, or and vice versa? Have there been challenges where you've kind of learned different things in the business world that have served you well being outside?
I think there are. And I think one of the things, and I know this is what a lot of people feel about golf as well in terms of business, is you have a lot of time with people, and you don't have to keep a conversation going for 12 hours, but you have conversation all the time, and you can learn things. And sometimes with those long pauses, it allows time for reflection and maybe a little more thoughtfulness, as opposed to having to answer something like we always do.
Yeah.
Ask you a question, and all of a sudden, boom, you got to come back, and you never get another shot to go think about it. And when I'm out by myself, of course, that's a time to sort of think through a strategy or a tactic or an organization or a pathway. And I think that opportunity for reflection, that opportunity for quiet thinking without 10,000 electronic things beeping at us is really important. And I guess it kind of like to bring that over to the business world as well. I have quiet times, and so you're not on meetings 10 hours a day every day, because that doesn't seem to provide much productivity. That's just chatting.
Keeps you
people.
busy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you prescriptively build that into your daily schedule somehow?
Yeah, I try to. Obviously, other people drive the schedule some days, but I think as a a course. I think a lot of our team at Battle has, people have different schedules, but the Mondays and Fridays are less formally scheduled, plenty of work to do. And then there's a lot more formal schedule, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, just kind of the way it's worked out.
Gotcha. So let's go back to the outdoors, and how would you split it up in matter like of time? How much do you spend outside on your own versus do you seek things to do with groups?
Well, always love to be with people, but just on a daily basis, some people go to the gym. I like to get out and hike, or in the wintertime skin up one of the mountains, arrowheads right across the valley from us, so we can skin up to the top of the lift there at the end of the day and come down with a headlamp on. So there's a lot of time spent by myself doing that, but it's usually trying to recruit somebody on a weekend or something. Skip's in the Front Range and McKillop, a few other people. So sometimes we'll ping everybody and say, what do you think about doing X, Y, or Z? But if nobody's around, you got to get out and do it. And we've got something out our back door in Colorado. It'll go pretty much up into national forest. Older and daughter and I have sort of named the conditioning hike, which is 2.5 miles from the house and 2,000 feet.
Oh, wow.
It's
just steep.
It's just basically straight up out the back door, but you just grind it up and look around, and you got a beautiful view. You can see a lot of cool stuff if you got the time to do it. And if you have your earbuds in, if you need to take that call, it's there. So we get out and do that a lot, or go skin, or if you got a few minutes to take a few runs off the lift, that's fine. Get on the bike, whatever. It's just, get out, be active, do something.
Explain what skinning is.
So your skis and boots look like regular downhill skis and boots, but the boots have a switch on them that'll allow them to articulate. And the bindings, you release the heel and put what's called a skin on the bottom of your ski, so you can basically walk up the mountain in the winter. So you go basically straight up the ski slope. So it's just a means. It's everybody sort of knows a little bit about cross country skis, the little skinny skis. This is big skis, regular skis, and I use them. And you flip a couple switches, and now they're downhill skis. When switches on your boots and a couple switches on the skis, take the skins off, and now and I use them for resort skiing as well. So they're that good. So it just allows you to, we go over to Arrowhead. That's, I don't know, an hour for me, an hour and 20 minutes up, and 2,300 feet, something like that. And then the bonus is at the end of that, you flip everything around and you get to ski down.
You're literally at the resort and you're walking straight up a downhill slope?
Yeah. And a lot of people use them. I mean, they're really designed for backcountry. And we do that as well. But, in terms of a daily thing, it's typically running over to the resort and doing it. And once you start in the backcountry, now you have to understand the avalanche danger and how to be able to read the slope and the snow and things like that. So we do a little more at the resort than I do in the backcountry.
I see. And for somebody that's not done that before, maybe incorrectly, but imagining you're going up the slope and people are flying down.
Well, the way
right past
in the resorts, they have rules. You can only do it after the lifts close.
I see.
You do have to watch out for snowcats, because as soon as the lifts close, the snowcats show up. But each resort's different. Aspen Ski Corp has an all-day version where they're kind of pre-arranged areas where you're supposed to go up. Vail Ski Corp just allows it when the lifts are closed. Something like Ski Cooper, which is up by Leadville, has all day, every day. So each resort's a little different. I think everybody's attorneys have a little different view of this, because they don't want you walking up when everybody's coming down necessarily. Yeah. They don't necessarily want you out there with the snowcats are out there.
So you're doing it after the lifts close and then coming down with a headlamp?
Typically, yeah. At this time of year. By March, you might get a little sun, but they're running the lifts as late as they can. So, that's typically what's going on. Now, if you're in the backcountry, you do it in the middle of the day or whatever. There's some places nearby that are pretty easy to get to and have a nice layout that isn't avalanche prone. And of course, the real backcountry people are doing things that are a little closer to the edge.
Yeah. So when you get to the top, the, hour and a half you've huffed it straight up the mountain. Do you stop and look around for a moment and kind of absorb the moment that you're
Always
in?
love it.
Always.
I mean,
What is
that's one
that
of the,
like?
something that a lot of us say when we get to the top of anything is, this never gets old. It's just gorgeous. And it depends on the day. You get a cloudy day, you can't see anything. But, since it's towards the end of the day, you might have, the sun's touching the top of the gores, from the west. The gores are in the, east of us there, just lighting up the top of the hills, or, maybe you have a, spectacular sunset just because of the cloud formations on the day, or sadly because of the smoke from California or something like that. It gets to be red and gorgeous.
Really?
But so, yeah, we are always looking around. And that's one of the bonuses, whether you've gone up the lift or whether you've gone up on a scan or hiked up, it's once you get to the top, it's something you want to see.
What does that do for you? Like, I guess what do you get out of that keeps you coming back?
I don't know. It's one of those things we've had conversations about, is what is the evolutionary value of beauty?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mountains, sunsets, oceans, humans, what is the real value of that? And I just think it's just something that's built into all of us. I mean, even the most jaded, I'll say New Yorker, but it could be anywhere. You stick them on top of a mountain or on a beach at sunset, and they're pretty impressed. I mean, it's just gorgeous. You stop and you think about it. We watch the sun go down into the ocean, and the green flash occur, something like that, and everybody gets excited. But I don't know. I just think it's a satisfaction. It's just an appreciation of the beauty. I like to look around and see what is out there and try to understand it. And we have a lot of conversations. Even might ask some of your future guests this question. As I've asked people for years, how do you, when you're out somewhere, think about geography? Do you think point to point? So you go to the Phillips 66 station, take a left, or do you see things as a bird? You kind of have a view from above. And it's kind of binary. A lot of people will say, no, I just sort of go to the, this marker, take a left. And some people say, yeah, I've kind of got this view in my head of where I am, almost like, you're not going to be as good as Google Maps or Google Earth, but kind of that head. So I think I like to look around, try to understand how all this came together, try to maybe understand the geology. Is this, when you get in different parts of the world, up in Alaska or something like that, you have some glacial form, some, river form valleys, and, how do you tell the difference and things like that? It's just kind of fun to try to pick it apart.
Yeah, and that takes an awareness of the moment that you're in and the space that you're in. I would imagine it clouds out any other busyness that might be running between your ears, And do you consider yourself a particularly spiritual person?
No, not particularly. So that doesn't really enter into it for me. But could it? I just enjoy the moment, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly found, and I would call it a spiritual moment, not from a religious or, organized standpoint, but the sense of awe and smallness that that's very consistent when I'm in big spaces, and that certainly draws me back. But that's kind of the what I'm hearing you describe is paying attention to the things that make those big spaces very, very unique. And so that's pretty cool. And is it something I've said this before on the podcast? It's interesting to me that human beings as a species would put themselves in situations that are hard and hard and hard and suffering and dangerous and difficult, and yet we do it over and over again.
Right.
So and I also think that as animals, like, we don't do many things or most things without a reward. So how would you verbalize what specifically is your reward when you're pursuing, whether it's skinning up a mountain or hiking through the Grand Canyon or whatever you may be facing?
Well, I think the reward is, as we described it, you do have that sense of awe, a sense of place, a sense of smallness, which is what we all are. Sometimes it's just, I was able to do it. a couple of these places. Somebody like Skip Schweiss is more than happy to go straight up some of these things. I'm not a rock climber, and you're not going to find me on any knife edges, which he's more than happy to do. But it's just, can you do it? Is it just a gorgeous place to be? And it is interesting from a human perspective. We spent a lot of time in Argentina, and they were tromping up the mountains to do stuff. When we're high mountains there, you find things and you're like, really? What were they doing here? So obviously it's not something that's just come as there's been more of an economic underpinning to the world. It's something that people have done forever. And I'm sure people were up Kilimanjaro in Africa, from the earliest days. And is there a reward for that? You're not going to hunt antelope any better up there. It's probably a lot easier to do that at the base of the mountain. But was it religious at the time? Could be. Some of the Incan monuments at the top of some of the mountains were that. But, somebody had to go up there first,
right,
before it became that.
And that's really interesting to me, that if it is just singularly the awe and kind of in a humble way, putting us in our place of, we're not that important. We're not big at all. And that's just what we can see. Right. And then you start thinking about all the things you can't see into the universe and the galaxy. And we're really small and really insignificant.
Exactly.
And if that truly is the reward, that's really fascinating, right? That the human being would need that to exist. And so I'm curious, where would you say you're happiest?
Well, with family. I'll take the easy piece there. But it's a great question. I mean, I love, you mentioned gravity. Certainly love using gravity, whether it's on a mountain bike or a pair of skis coming down the mountain, because it just has that independent feeling of flying, I guess, in some sense, since humans haven't developed wings for 200 or 300 million more years. But being with friends or family somewhere unique, that's just that little half bubble different is always fun. Is that the best place? It's one of the best places. I don't tend to go, this is absolutely the only place to be, because there's a lot of different situations. If we have a bunch of friends over here in St. Louis, 12 people at the dinner table, that's pretty good too. But out in the backcountry, somewhere unique, somewhere where it's gorgeous, is always a big winner.
Yeah. So the overlap of, or the combination of people and place. Are you would you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
Well, I would say introvert. Some people would debate that, but I think there's some things sort of written about the founders in the U.S. where they had a way of being around family and friends, and then they had their external brand, which might be more outgoing. So I think I have a little bit of that, where when I put the work hat on, it's probably a little more
perform a different way.
It's more of a performance, in which we all do.
Yep.
And probably a little more introverted. If you walk me into a room full of people, I'm not the one that's going to meet everybody in the first 20 minutes. We have plenty of friends that'll do that, but I'll get to know them eventually.
So, and as far as like re-energizing, is it the dinner table with 12 friends? Is that more re-energizing than standing on top of a mountain in Colorado?
And they're equal in their own way.
Really? Okay.
If we go up Notch Mountain here, which is right across from Holy Cross, that's a good thing to do in the evening or up in the morning. It's a 13er. And that's great. It's wonderful. But if you're up there by yourself, it's a lot less interesting than if you're hanging out with, a few of your friends. So if you could combine those two, like the Excellent Adventures do, that's sort of the best.
Yeah, that's fascinating. One question I like to ask is, and especially as you've raised a family, tell me a little bit about how you have planned and made these things a priority. So it's not, I guess, both from a time and a money standpoint, right? And, as a financial planner, my mind obviously goes to, you got to map it out. It doesn't just happen. You don't just wake up
Right.
and get off the couch and go, I'm going to hike a 14er. And likewise, your money doesn't just show up, right? We all
Right.
have limited resources. So tell me a little bit about how you have made that work. What has been your process?
Well, we've had a pretty strong opinion, both my wife and I think my parents, that you learn a lot through travel. And we've made that a priority. We've been a number of places, not everywhere in the world or anything. We can't afford to do that, but we've been a lot of places, and you try to choose places where you're not necessarily just rehashing the same thing. It's wonderful to go to museums, but in cities, but that gets to be repetitive. What can you learn? Can you learn something from an area where maybe people don't have as many resources? When we're kind of deep in the Argentine backcountry, you come across people with a 6-hour walk from the nearest human. They're living more or less like they did 500 years ago, just up in the mountains tending llamas or something. And a couple times a year, keyword year, they'll walk down to see some other neighbor or go to town to get sugar or something like that.
Wow.
And I think you can learn a lot from that. We made that a priority with our family. My parents did with me, is doing some travel, whether it's in the United States or beyond, that's interesting, educational, and has something that's a little more than, we went to Disney World, but something a little more than Disney World
Yeah.
to it. So I think it's just, you just have to focus on it. You have to plan that. You say, maybe in 2 years we can do this. What's the cost? Can we do that? Do we have to save for it? Can we just pull it out of the bank? Different things have different elements to it, but and what can you learn about and think about that's a little bit broader? Going to the Galapagos is different because now you have to think about island biogeography, and go all the way back to Darwin and why did he show up there and the light bulb went on, and you can learn obviously the Grand Canyon's a different thing, or some local Tom Sauk Mountain here in Missouri, not quite as interesting as the Grand Canyon, but it's still fascinating on its own.
So Missouri has mountains. I didn't realize
Well,
that.
they're not going to look like this, but yeah, they have a lot of down. As you get south into the Ozark Mountains,
Yeah. Okay. The Ozarks.
you get a lot of vertical. It doesn't
Yeah.
reach 10,000 feet or anything, but yeah, from the bottom to the top, it's still a pretty good schlep.
Yeah. I'm familiar with Arkansas, and is particularly the northwest corner of Arkansas, which touches right there, southern Missouri. There are some really beautiful spots in that area that I think would surprise people.
I think
Some
in
people that
Nashville,
have,
Nashville, Franklin, where you are, is got some big ups and downs.
Yeah.
That maybe again don't reach to 10,000 feet, but it's good work to get to the top.
certainly. So I've skipped over this a couple times, but tell me a little bit more about this Argentina connection.
Well, it's interesting. One of the guys that was a co-founder of EverBank with me, a guy named David Galland, after he left us, got involved ultimately with a group that was doing some developments in the extreme northwest corner of Argentina. So I think everybody sort of thinks about Buenos Aires or Patagonia, but this is almost up to Bolivia. It's up against the Chilean border in the Andes foothills. And remote little town, beautiful, nice facilities, wonderful folks. But it allows you to just go straight up into the Andes from there. And whether it's the high mountains or the what they call La Puna, the area between, because there's in that area through Chile and Argentina, there's actually kind of two continental divides. We sort of think of everything goes to the Atlantic, everything goes to the Pacific. So there's everything that goes to the Atlantic, everything that goes to the Pacific, and there's the section in the between that goes nowhere.
Oh, wow.
It stays. And that's where, of course, a lot of the lithium's being mined today in Bolivia and Peru and Chile and Argentina. But it's, salt flats and, in the interspace. And we just like to explore there, learn things. We have some friends that have some interesting and substantial properties that let us walk around on them. And we've planned out some pretty interesting backcountry things there that, people haven't done for a while. We did sort of planned one out that came over from the La Puna to the Calchaquí Valley that was an old route, but it was an old Incan route. And there's few people that know where it was, but we didn't really know if it really was a trail there, if we could actually get there. And we ended up meeting several gauchos and some other friends way out in the middle of nowhere, and then coming back over to the civilization side, hiking a couple days, camping out and stuff. So you're, going up to about, the pass was about 12,000 feet, but, really remote. And that's where we run into people like the individual I mentioned, where she's, 6-hour walk from the nearest human. Her husband went out to tend the llamas, broke his leg and froze to death. So she's been up there by herself for years. And it was kind of funny. She has a son, she has a daughter too. But she says, "Oh, my son goes to school over there," and just sort of points up over the hill. It's only about a 12-hour walk, but he goes for 2 weeks at a time and comes home, for a fortnight sort of thing.
Wow.
And we just like being in those areas where they're a little, less tourists, less officially explored, but still fascinating spots. And the Skip actually came down.
Oh, did he really?
16 months ago. He's been down a couple times, but we did something called Kachi, the Nevado to Kachi, the top of the Kachi mountain, a year ago, October. So about 16 months ago. It's just 2,933, so about 21,000 foot mountain. Older daughter and Skip and some friends and a couple other people came and did that. So
your own little excellent adventure.
It's a micro adventure.
Are these backpacking overnight trips, or you're?
Yeah, that was about a week round trip.
That's
6
cool.
days.
That's very cool.
Several stops along the way as we acclimatized. Final camps up at 17,600, something like that, and then that final push on the final day. I didn't think taking 7 hours to go 3.5 miles was interesting.
That's a slog.
But the oxygen, I guess, is a tough commodity up there. Chip came on that one too.
How long have you found it takes you to acclimate to that kind of elevation?
Well, we're out in Colorado. We live at 7,400, so it's easier. I think some of the guys that were sea level based had some more difficulty with that, but it's just a matter of time. We spent a couple of days ahead of time up at 13 to 19,000 feet, just acclimatizing and hiking around some other places. And that was helpful. But I've also been on something called Galan, Galan, the volcano. And I got to about 18.5 and too weirdly lightheaded and just decided to turn around. That was a 19,000 something peak. And we just said, not worth the hassle. And as you'll hear some of our friends say, it's most important thing is coming home, not the peak. So it's just like, I'll do that another day.
Yeah, and many times the trip down it can be more dangerous than the trip up because you're more, even if you do hit the summit. I don't know the breakdown of deaths on Everest going up versus coming down, but I believe it's more on the descent because you don't have quite the focus. You're obviously more tired, and as we referenced earlier, going downhill is difficult.
That's exactly right. And I think it's the type, I'm not going to be doing any of the super high mountains like Everest, but I think that's just because you've had more time in the death zone.
Yeah.
The body decays at those levels, even with supplemental oxygen. And you're tired and you've already done it. Yay. Your focus, is down because your focus was getting to the goal. And I think that's one issue I think people have mentioned a little bit about some of those, over 8,000 meter peaks is people who do those are so goal oriented that they'll sometimes drop the safety element along the way. And hopefully your guide reads you the riot act, but they're also being paid to get you to the top. So they have a weird incentive in that sense.
So that is also a kind of an idea that I think about and have explored in some of these conversations is when you have these big adventure goals, how do you know when to turn around? Like what is it training and preparedness to know when you've gone too far? And is it are you able to do that partly because of realizing that the goal is in the journey, not in the summit.
I think that it's the attitude. I mean, again, if you're
It's the
just sort of
attitude.
jumping in and saying, I have to do this, that's sort of a different thing. And you have so many, a lot of type quadruple A people that sort of get into this, and by God, I'm going to make the summit no matter what. And I think, for myself, for our family, and for as far as I know, all the friends that I hang out with, it's about, the journey. Am I going to make it? Well, I hope so, but you don't need to go to that summit. There'll be another day. And if for some reason, maybe it turns out to be class 4 instead of class 3, I'm not going to, that's great. Wave at it. Enjoy. I'm not going to take the rock fall with 1,000-foot drop behind me just to get there, because don't be stupid. So it's an attitude, and we're all driven. We're at least A- type people, maybe type A people. So we want to get there, but it's about the journey. It's about the attitude going in. What is your objective? Number 1 objective is to come home. Number 2 objective is not to have anybody hurt. Number 3 objective could be the summit.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it, because with anything, if you're answering the wrong question, or if you're asking the wrong question, you're going to get the wrong answer. And if the summit, the accomplishment is ultimately the end all goal, it seems like it would put you eventually in a precarious situation. And I like that. The goal is to come home.
Mm-hmm. It is. And the experience, and as we've talked about before, can you experience the beauty? I mean, maybe the best place might be sitting in the meadow 2/3 of the way down, because there's a herd of goats there. There are mountain goats there that are interesting to watch. We haven't ever had to stop for that, but maybe that could be the answer someday.
Yeah, people talk about meditation practices and kind of slowing the world down. Do you do any practices like that, or is being in the outdoors and backcountry enough? Because it seems like you're getting to the same end result with that.
I guess that's mine. We've certainly talked about meditation, and maybe I always joke, when I was growing up, if the modern diagnostics were around, I probably would have been on an Adderall drip, let alone pills. So, it may not be in my physical ability to do something like that. But, the backcountry is where I get it's certainly slowing things down. It's grinding through simple things. It's going back over, what you've said to loved ones over the last little while. Is that the right thing? Is that the wrong thing? You can think about stuff like that. So for me, I think could it be the equivalent? Yeah. Yeah, we talked a little bit about hockey. That's an hour and a half of not thinking about anything.
Yeah.
Because you're focused on, showing up and doing your job. But that's a way to clear your mind, and I guess that's a little bit of a meditation thing as well.
Yeah. So is the hockey? I think we were talking about that before we started the record. But is the hockey is that to keep you in shape so you can go climb up the mountains, or do you have a different goal for it?
Well, I think there's a lot of that. It's it's staying in shape for whatever we want to do. I mean, it's a great, quick activity. I guess I've joked a lot. I'm not smart enough to go to a gym. You have to throw something down, whether it's a puck or a soccer ball or something, and make me chase it. I can't. I'm just not good enough to do anything else. And so it's a good way to stay in shape. It's a good way. It's another community of people. A good friend in Colorado, wherever he went, he would join a pickup hockey league, and all of a sudden you have 15 people you now know, and maybe 30, because there's the other team that has a beer after the game. So it's just a lot of this is about community. Same way people do golf, same way people do pickleball. It's just stuff that's fun to do, keeps you in shape, and builds a social network.
That's cool. Do you play in Colorado, or is it only in St. Louis?
Yeah, we were in a beer league out there. It's once a week sort of thing in the late night after the kids get off their practices. So it's a little more torturous.
Is beer league I mean, I don't know enough about this adult league hockey, but are guys literally pounding beers in between, or why is it called beer league?
Yeah, it's just because it's the nighttime, and everybody stays around afterwards.
Okay.
It has a beer, and sure, some of the guys, particularly the younger guys, might imbibe something before the game, but I find it hard enough to finish the game without it. So
Fair enough. Well, we'll bring the boat into dock here a little bit. What is next? What do you have that you're looking forward to for the rest of this year?
Well, the easy and obvious thing, there's the Excellent Adventure in August. That's going to be out in Zion, which is a gorgeous place. I don't know if you've been.
I have not been.
You need to go to Zion. You need to go to Bryce. You need to go to Escalante. Utah is just in Moab, of course. I mean, Utah is just amazing everywhere you go. So it's going to be a great hike. We'll head back out to Colorado next week. Probably get some skiing and hiking in. We'll see what happens there. But we'll try to put together a few things for this summer. Haven't put the plans together because, it's not like you have to book a reservation, although more and more some of the national parks require it.
Yeah.
But, Skip and I got caught. We were going to do a hike up in the Rocky Mountain National Park and sort of forgot to go online and get in the queue. So we ended up doing something else, which is a wonderful hike as well. But we got shut out of the park because, you didn't have a reservation.
Oh, so you showed up and they said, no, you can't come?
Yeah. We just sort of missed that memo, I guess. But we still made a day of it. So it was good. But, something like we do things a little more on the 2 week, 3 week sort of notice sort of standpoint. Yeah, we always love the GoPro Games in Vail, which you need to come to.
What is that? I'm not familiar with GoPro Games. Is it
It
like the X Games?
No, it's everybody participates. There's rafts, kayaks, bikes, running, slackline, fly casting, yoga, everything.
That's wild.
And you're participating next to somebody you might follow on Instagram in a particular kayak or rafting or something like that, or mountain biking. It's just a lot of fun. It's 80,000 of our closest friends come, so it's a big event. But it's just a fun thing to do, and you sign up for one of the events and do it. Our son-in-law and I do the downriver raft. I'll call it a race, even though we don't place or anything like that. But we were trying to figure out something with the raft, standing in line to take off one year, about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And he asked the guys in front of us, some questions and advice, and they were real nice. They said, well, try this, try that. After that, those guys took off. We turned around, and the guys behind us said, well, you asked the right guys. That's the U.S. national rafting team.
Jeez. And you're going in right behind them?
We're in a different time zone. Let's put it that way. If they finished in 10 minutes, we finished in 20, but whatever.
That's great.
But it's just a lot of fun. It's outdoors. Son-in-law did the 20K last year up the mountain. They've had, there's mountain bike races. But you participate. Yeah, typically the first or second week in June. I don't know what it is this year, but when people come out, we've had, way back in the EverBank days, we had, corporate version of this, and a lot of, people came out and participated and had a great time. And these days we just have family, friends, relatives, and stuff like that, and kind of have a unspoken requirement. Everybody has to sign up for something, even if it's just fly casting or yoga. But you can do some pretty wild stuff. So that's on the agenda.
You have a big group of family and friends that come.
We try to have, it varies by year.
Yeah.
One year Ragnar stepped on that, but that was great because we went up and did Ragnar, hung out with everybody. That's not something I'll do. I'm not going to do a running race for, 20 miles, but nobody would want me to. But everybody's outdoors and wanting to do something. So.
And this is in Vail? Is that what you said?
That's in Vail, yeah.
I see. Okay.
I think it started out as the Tiva Games years ago. Okay. GoPro took it over 10 years ago, probably. And so it's, it's heavily sponsored and, well run, and it's a lot of fun.
Is it kind of have a festival atmosphere to it as well?
Yeah. And they're the usual vendors and stuff. So you have every outdoor manufacturer on the planet, big and small, is there, and food and drink and everything. It's with 80,000 people coming in for it, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Literally 80,000 people.
Yeah.
That is a lot. Wow.
No, it doesn't mean
Vail's a big mountain, but that's still a lot of people.
Yeah, but it's not that everybody's there every day for it, because it's usually Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but people drift through, and the parking lots are full, but it's okay.
And are you close enough to your house that you can bike or walk, or how do you get over when?
In
like
those
that's
cases,
going
we
on?
have one of our friends out there actually has a space, which is kind of a unique thing. They have condoized parking spaces,
Really?
but so that helps. But
Yeah.
we know how to get to the garages and at the right time and get there. We're not that we keep track of this, but we're 17 minutes from the Vail garage. So
Yeah. Not that you keep track. Yeah.
yep.
Well, Frank, this has been a lot of fun, and you certainly have done a great job helping me explore through what it takes for the everyday explorer to make it a priority in their life. And the canvas looks different from one person to the other, but I love seeing how the artwork gets to the same end result. And I appreciate you taking the time to share and be open and honest about what you've done in your life.
And Joshua, I'd like to see the Joshua Self version of this podcast someday. See how you're handling this for your own family and for
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that one of these days. Kind of flip it around and have somebody else on the host mic. And I don't know, that's a little bit intimidating. So I can appreciate the position that I've put you in. So,
Well, we'd love to have you do it because I'd like to hear it for myself.
all right, Frank, I appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Have a great day.
All right. Okay, man, I really enjoyed that. I hope you did as well. The next one will be coming at you in a couple weeks, so stay tuned. Until then, I hope you have your own great adventure.